Okay, today we're going to start on the bottom of Chaf Gimel Amud Aleph. That's 23a, the second line from the bottom. And thank Hashem that we're able to learn Torah every day. In the course of our learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. So it starts off like this. They asked the question from Rab Ami. This is probably the yeshiva. They asked Rab Ami. He's a student of Rabbi Yochanan. Eved Ma'oshe Yasser Shliach Lekabel Get Ish Miyad Baila. Can a slave become a shliach lekabala? Shliach lekabala means a messenger on behalf of an agent on behalf of the woman to receive the get from her husband. Can the woman send a eved to do this? Now, we were talking before, can you send a non-Jew to be a messenger? Now, we were talking about the husband sending. Now we're talking about the woman receiving. You see, the husband can send an agent, that's called the shliach l'haylacha, an agent to bring the get. The woman can send an agent, that's called the shliach l'kabala, an agent to receive the get. Now we're asking, we know that a non-Jew can't be an agent, right? A blind person, a child, they can't be agents. But what about a slave? Amalahu. So Rab Ami responded, since the Mishnah said that who was invalid to be an agent? A non-Jew. If it wanted to tell me an eved, then it would have said an eved, and then I for sure would have known a non-Jew. The fact that it said a non-Jew and didn't say eved michlal, that implies the eved kosher, that a slave who's partially Jewish is kosher. It's acceptable to receive the get. Amar Rabasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabasi, who's a friend of Rab Ami, he says that I heard from Rabbi Yochanan that ein eved nasser shliach lekabel get ish miyad baila lefi she'ein b'teres gittin kedusha. That you had a nice proof, and that's a nice thought that you quoted the Mishnah. But the truth is that since a slave does not have the halachas of marriage and divorce, so you can't be a messenger for anything that you're not involved in. If it doesn't apply to you, you can't be a messenger for that.
This is for writing a get to the represent. If someone stands over them.
Regarding someone standing over them and they write, that we said that there was a possibility that that could work, but then we said no, he's going to do it, but he's not going to have the right intention. Yeah, that was a discussion yesterday. I don't know what the conclusion is. Now we're asking if the non-Jew, if not the non-Jew, if the slave could receive the get on behalf of the a non-Jewish slave, which is he's partially Jewish. So we answered right now from Rabbi Yochanan that he can't because he doesn't have the laws of marriage.
He's just a shliach.
Yeah, but you can only use a shliach for that he himself has those laws. In other words, he has to be under the category of those laws, and then if he can do it for himself, he can do it for someone else. But since he can't do it for himself, he can't be a shliach for someone else. He doesn't himself have marriage and divorce. Slaves don't get married. They mate. They match them up. They mate them, but they don't get married. And they don't have divorce. Right? Since they don't have marriage and divorce, they can't be a messenger. Maskefla Rebbe Lazar. Rebbe Lazar, who's a student of Rabbi Yochanan as well, so he asks Rabasi, who's quoting this, he asks him a question. Taima, the whole reason that you just gave me, why a slave cannot be a messenger to receive the get on behalf of the woman. That's because B'milsa B'lesa, he said that he doesn't have that category of laws that is not applicable to him. He doesn't go under that category. But let's say he did go have those laws. Kosher, then the slave could be a messenger. In other words, you didn't say that slaves can't be messengers. You said that a slave can't be messenger for this. Why not this for divorce? because the slave doesn't have divorce, he can't be used as a messenger for divorce. But if there would be something that a slave would have those halachas for, because the slave is partially Jewish, he has to keep the halachas like a woman has to keep which means that excludes positive time-bound mitzvahs. What about a non-Jew or a kuti? Kuti is not a Karaite, but he's a Samaritan that they converted, and they do have they are supposed to keep the laws, but then we said that not. Whatever the case is, the isnu b'teres truma denafshayu, they do have their own laws of truma. The Tanan, if they have their own produce, a non-Jew can have produce. He has his own produce. Kuti has produce. They separate truma. You're not allowed to go and eat that if you're not a Kohen, because it's considered truma, which means that what their actions are valid. They can actually separate truma, and the truma becomes real truma. Utanan, but I have another Mishnah. A non-Jew that took truma from a Jew. Afilu bishus. We weren't talking about a slave. We're talking about a real non-Jew here. Something like that. Something like that, but it's a little worse. They ended up worshiping idols. So over here, they're just going to go under the category of a non-Jew. So a non-Jew that takes truma, shetarim shel Yisrael, he takes truma on behalf of a Jew. Afilu b'shus, even if the Jew gave him permission to do that, like sent him as a messenger, ain't shumasi truma, it doesn't work. My timer, why doesn't it work? Lav mishum d'ksiv atem gam atem. So Rabbi Lazar is challenging Rabasi. Rabasi said that the reason why a non-Jew or an Eved, the reason why an Eved, slave, cannot be a messenger on behalf of the woman is because she doesn't have the category of marriage and divorce. But if she would have the category of whatever it is, then the Eved would be able to be a messenger. But it turns out that a non-Jew that does have the laws of Truma still can't be a messenger. Why not? Because we say a non-Jew can't be a messenger. We just have a rule, can't be a messenger. So he goes back to Rabasi, and he says, it has nothing to do with if he has marriage and divorce. It has to do with being a messenger in general. A slave can't be a messenger.
I wonder if we can make the case that there is a possibility that they might want to stay with their master and want to convert.
And then,
And therefore they'll,
and therefore they can be. Just wait 1 second and you'll see that thought. Amri debei Rabbi Yanai answers this. He says that, you see, what we were doing here is we were pushing together the concept of a slave and the non-Jew, and we ended up with a question. And we said that why are you telling me it's because the slave doesn't have the laws of marriage and divorce? We find by a non-Jew that he can't be a shliach. Forget about if he has the laws of marriage. He can never, even if he would have the laws, he still can't be a shliach. Can't be an agent. So Rabbi Yanai says, no, you're confused two concepts here. He says, Ma atem b'nei bris, av shluchem b'nei bris. It's not, by the laws of Truma, it says that you can make a shliach. And it says the word atem, you. And it adds the word gam atem, also you. From the word also, it teaches me that I can use a messenger, I can use an agent. Now, so yeah, I can use an agent to separate Truma for myself. But when we say also you, we compare the also to the you. Just like you are Jewish, so to the agent has to be Jewish. If that's the case, then a slave can't be an agent. That was the question of Rabbi Lazar. So the Gemara answers with Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai says, just like you have a covenant, you have a bris, so too, anyone that has a covenant can be an agent, which includes a slave, because a slave is circumcised. Even a non-Jewish slave is circumcised. The messenger has to be, it has to be at least the level of a slave. But what we just learned now from Rabbi Yanai is that a slave can, yes, be a messenger, even though a non-Jew cannot be a messenger. So in other words, we were drawing a line between who can be a messenger. Originally, we said he has to be Jewish. We said, no, he doesn't have to be Jewish. He has to be one of the covenant, which includes the slave. So now we go back to Rabasi. Rabasi telling us in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that why can a slave not be an agent to receive the get? It's only because he doesn't have the laws of marriage and divorce, but not because he can't be an agent. That's actually accurate. Because according to Rabbi Yanai, a slave can, yes, be an agent. And it was only a non-Jew that can't be an agent. So why can't he receive the get? Oh, that's because he doesn't have the laws of marriage and divorce. And you can only be, and only you can, if you don't go under that category of laws, then you can't be an agent for that.
Is there a concept of shliach d'Rabbanan? In other words, have the rabbis amended this in any way?
There's a concept that a guy, yesh shlichus la'akam, in Shabbos, you can't send a guy to do a malacha for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's midrabanan, and I think there's a Rashi in Bava Metzia that says that it's a deraisa, but I think it's assumed that it's a derabanan. Yeah, but regarding the get, we won't say that it's going to work. Taisus points out that we're not talking about her own slave. We're talking about a different slave. When she's sending a messenger to receive the divorce, if it would be her own slave, then that would be comparable to putting the get inside her courtyard. And the slave can acquire it on her behalf. It's different than sending someone else's slave as a messenger. Someone else's slave as a messenger means that the messenger is receiving it as a shliach. When it's her slave, it's her receiving it as her long hand. It's mishum yad or mishum chatzer or something like that. It's considered her courtyard. It's different than a messenger. Messenger is a proxy, right? This is, if it would be her own slave, it would be like putting it into her account. You know, she could have had a slave. Rich woman would have slaves. Could be. Remember when Rachel and Leah got married, the father Lavan gave them Bilhah, a maid that comes along. Okay, we go back to discuss this statement, but now it's not in the name of Rabasi. Now it's the name of Reb Chia bar Abba, in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan said this before, but we had Rabasi stating it. Yeah, I have another text, another version in my Gemara, but it doesn't really make sense to me. Instead of Ravasi saying it, the other text, the other version says it's Reb Ami saying it. The problem is it was Reb Ami that they asked the question to, and he answered differently. So it's a little problematic. Okay, so it goes like this. Am Reb Chia bar Abba, Am Rabbi Yochanan. Reb Chia bar Abba says the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Reb Chia bar Abba was really like a main student of Rabbi Yochanan. He was praised, and his statements are very accurate. I'm sorry, a slave cannot be a shliach on behalf of the woman to receive. The slave can't be an agent to receive the get from the husband because he doesn't have the laws of marriage and divorce, as we quoted before in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. And even though it was taught Hariyat Shivcha Vladich ben Chayrin, there's a case like this. A slave master tells to his maidservant, he says, you will remain to be a maidservant. However, your child is going to be free. Im Haisa Ubra, if she was pregnant, was probably Im Haisa Meuberes or something. In your unborn child, if she was pregnant. So Zachsalai, So she acquires this freedom on behalf of the child. And the child is free when he's born, I guess. The Gemara asks, "My im haisa ubra zachsalei." What are you talking about? What does this have anything to do with marriage and divorce? Even though we was taught, it says, even though you were taught that the woman can acquire this, she can acquire it on behalf of her child. That's nothing to do with marriage. Basically, what we said was that a slave can't be an agent to receive a get, but a slave can be an agent to receive a document of manumission on behalf of her child. But Yasser Reb Shmuel Bar Yehuda Amar, when Reb Shmuel Bar Yehuda came, he said like this: Rabbi Yochanan Tarti Amar. Rabbi Yochanan was really saying two separate things. He says, "Niren dvarim she'even mekabel get lechaver miyad rabbi shel chaveri avali miyad rabbi shalai." It appears, it seems that this would be accurate, that a slave could be an agent to receive a deed of manumission, of freedom, on behalf of his friend, from the master of his friend. But he can't be an agent to receive a deed of manumission from another co-slave, another slave from his own master. The problem is that when a slave acquires something, it goes immediately to the master. So that means that the slave's hand is similar to the master's hand.
It's an extension
of the master's hand. So there is a way of a slave becoming free when the master gives him the deed of manumission. Now, the problem is that the master's really putting it from one pocket to another, because the slave is really him. So he never really, but he can only get free if he receives the document. And he
So
can't.
what comes first?
That's right. So there's a statement later on from Rava. Rava says this concept of Gittin Daf, that it happens simultaneous. That the rights that he has to acquire the get, over here to get shicher, the rights that he has to acquire the deed of manumission is because he's free, but he's not free until he gets it, and he can't get it until he's free. So it's this like vicious cycle. He can never get out of it. Every time the master gives him the master acquires it back, and it keeps going back. So the only way that this can work is that if it happens simultaneous, that as the master is freeing him, he's also acquiring the document. So he gets the right to acquire the document by becoming free at the time that he's receiving the document. It works together. And with this, Rava explains later on and that how a woman gets divorced, because every time a woman receives a get, it automatically belongs to the husband. And the get has to be given from the husband, has to be transferred from the husband to the woman, but every time it gives to the woman. So, okay, so the rule is that Gita Viyada Kachas, that it happens simultaneous, that her rights to receive her own get comes together with the get. As she's being divorced, she's able now to get the get. Okay, it happens. That only applies to a master that's freeing his own slave. But a master that's not freeing his own slave is freeing a different slave. So as he's giving it to, let's say there's two slaves, John and Bill, right? So he gives it to John on behalf of Bill. So it turns out that if he's the master of both, so he never gave it to anyone because it's still his. So Bill isn't freed. But if it's a different master, so then there was a real transfer because it went from a different master to John and on behalf of Bill. So then John actually did acquire it. Now, does it go immediately to his master? That could be, because whatever he acquires on behalf, but it doesn't matter now because once it stepped out of the master's domain and it was a deed of freedom, it wasn't a transfer of ownership. It was a deed of manumission. So then Bill will go free. Okay. That's what we're saying over here, that a slave can receive the deed of manumission on behalf of his friend, but not from the same master, only from a different master. And if someone will whisper to you and say, Zu halacha shnuya, we know this already. Actually, not just that we know this already, but it works even differently. That two slaves of the same master, which is a mother that has a child in her, and the master wants to free the child, and he gives the deed of manumission to the mother on behalf of the child, the child goes free. See, it's two slaves from the same master, and it actually works. So Amalei Shnei Gedolei Adar, they said to him, but he gives it to the mother, it means that it's going right back to him. Because if it's the same master, then there's a problem. Oh, so take a look. So Shnei Gedolei Adar Pirshu Asadavar. There's two great people that explain this, and that is Reb Zeira, Reb Shmuel Bar Yitzchak. Chad Amar, one of them explained it as Hamani Rebbe. This is the opinion of Rebbe Damar HaMeshachar Chatzi Avdikana. Goes like this: that Rebbe says that a person can free half a slave. How does he free half a slave? If he's freeing the slave, then Gittin Daf that the document comes together. And so Rebbe holds that the half of him that's getting free is the half of him that's receiving the document. It works perfectly. Chadamar, the other one said, my time with the Rebbe, what is there? He added an explanation. Why over here is it considered freeing half the slave? Because the fetus is considered a limb of the mother. And so really when they're freeing the mother, when freeing the fetus is actually freeing the mother also. One of the limbs of the mother is going free. So if that's the case, then it's Gittin Daf. So it's a simultaneous ability to acquire, and the rights, and then the acquiring the freedom happens simultaneously, because the mother and the child are really one entity. The child is not a different entity inside the mother, but the child is a limb of the mother. So that really it's a part of the mother that's going free. Yeah, that was complicated. Right. Yeah. Dr. Stein is bringing up a Ben Pekua. If you want to remember that old complication in Chulin.
That's his favorite thing to talk about.
Right. Yeah.
There are other cases where they take the body and say, we're giving half of it under a different set of laws that like this unusual, no?
Right.
Is there any place in all of
There is a big discussion about Uber Yarachimai, if a child is considered a limb or we had this discussion in Yavamas. We had it when the mother goes to the mikveh and with the child inside. Is the child converted separately as a separate entity, or is the child converted as a limb of the mother? That was we had a discussion over there. I don't think the Gemara ever concludes. I think Gemara says if you learn it like this, we can answer it, we explain how it works. If you learn it like that, we can explain how it works. There are ways of explaining it. If it's a separate entity, then it's a chatzitza, right? We said no, it's a chatzitza means a separation between the water and the. We said no, that's the way it grows, so it's not considered a separation. Yeah, it's considered a conversion for the child. Okay, now we have a new Mishnah. It says, usually we trust every single person to say that the woman's husband has passed away. someone comes from overseas and says, I was there, this woman should be allowed to get married, should be allowed to get remarried because I saw her husband had passed away. Now, do we need 2 witnesses for that? We said no. We said even one witness could do that because Mishamigan, we didn't want a woman to be without a husband, be tied. So we let her. We believed him. I was just listening to a shiur on something we were talking about from the Divrei Chaim, that how long is it considered a tied woman? Let's say, not that the husband died, but there's other cases where we consider the woman can never get remarried. But let's say it's a temporary thing. Is it considered, how long would it be considered egon for her? What's considered how long? What's that time period? And so the Divrei Chaim said 6 weeks. That was, she has to be without a husband for 6 weeks. She's considered an aguna. Pretty sure. The rabbi that was giving the shiur said he thinks today it's 6 days. Anyway, okay, whatever the case is, we don't want it to be an aguna, and therefore we'll trust a messenger to come and say, we'll trust any person to say that the husband had passed away. However, there's an exception to that. There's 5 people that are not trusted in this. And those 5 people are people that really don't have her best interest in mind. First one is Chamaisa, her mother-in-law. So they say, why did Chava live so long? She didn't have a mother-in-law. So Chamaisa, the mother-in-law possibly is trying to mess up the daughter by saying that her daughter-in-law, by saying that the husband, her son, had died. Meanwhile, she's going to get remarried. She gets remarried to someone else. It's going to ruin the marriage. She won't be able to go back to the first husband, and when the husband resurfaces, right? Bas Chamaisa, this is her mother-in-law's daughter, which is, I think it's a sister-in-law usually. Tsarasa, this is a co-wife. The co-wife wants to mess up the second wife and said, "Oh yeah, our husband died. Why don't you go get married?" Don't worry, I'm not interested right now. But meanwhile, that the other one is going to get remarried, and then the husband returns. She won't be able to be with the husband. This co-wife, the rival wife, has just freed herself off from her rival. Yevimta, this is if the sister-in-law, the brother of her husband, the wife of her brother-in-law, the wife of her husband's brother, says that your husband died. Now, this in a way is messing up herself, because now one of the brothers is going to have to do yibum. But what she really means is that he didn't die, and you're never going to be able to how would that happen? She's going to be forbidden to both her husband and the husband's brother. She's just trying, if he resurfaces. Ubas Baila, and also the husband's daughter, which is basically her stepdaughter, also does not have her best interest in mind. Now, those 5 women, which we do not trust to say that the husband had passed away in some other country, those women are yes believed to say, to bring the get and say your husband sent you a divorce. Here it is. Ma ben get lamisa. What's the difference? The Mishnah, this is an interesting Mishnah. It asked the question in the Mishnah. There's like a Gemara question in the Mishnah. What's the difference? It says shaksav mechia, because she can make up a story, but here there's a document that comes along with it. That's already a different thing. She has support from a document, so then we're going to trust her because we have a document. We wouldn't have trust her if it's just a story, but together with the document, we'll trust her.
They didn't have death certificates in those days.
No, they had to have people showing up. They didn't have a death certificate.
Because nowadays, someone's not even dead unless someone signed the doctor signed the
Right.
certificate. They could be dead
Right.
for 10 hours.
Then they had a life certificate. The person testified had to be alive.
They have, every once in a while, you hear some insurance thing where they claim that someone was dead and then they found them in New Jersey. Is, you know,
I find it interesting. 4 women that
Yeah, can be a witness, yeah. Usually a woman can't be a witness. Over here, a family member and the women can be a witness in order to help the woman get remarried. Special leniency. Now, one of the reasons why we trust him is because we assume the woman, before she gets remarried, is going to do her own research. The Isha Atzma Mevias Gita. A woman herself can bring her own get. This is a complicated case because when a woman brings a get, that means she already has the get. That means that she's already divorced. So how is it that she's bringing her own get and she's not yet divorced? So the Gemara is going to have to explain this. Patience. And when she brings her own get, she has to say that it was written and signed in my presence. We'll see the case. It's complicated. It's not kind. The Gemara goes through a bunch of options and it doesn't really seem to fit till we have a possibility. But Tanya, Gemara starts off that but we have a brisa that says we have a brisa that says exactly the opposite of what it says in the Mishnah, that these 5 women, the same way they can't testify that the husband died, they also can't bring the get. And our Mishnah says they can. Rabbi Yosef says, how do we answer a question? We say it's either machlokes or we say that the scenario is different. Change the case. Like Kasha, it's not a question. Depends if it's in the land of Israel or if it's in Chutz La'aretz. What's the difference in the land of Israel or Chutz La'aretz? If it's in the land of Israel, you don't have to say a statement, proclaim that I was there at this writing and the signing of the get. In Chutz La'aretz, you do have to. So if there's a get and there's no statement, Rabbi Yosef says, we trust her. She doesn't even have to open her mouth. Whatever she opens up her mouth, she's a liar. But the document, that's fine. Okay? So that's Rabbi Yosef says. In the land of Israel, where she doesn't have to say, we believe her. She is believed. But outside the land of Israel, we're relying on her. No, we don't believe her. We don't believe her because we have to rely on her words. Amalei Abaya. Abaya says, it seems to me it's exactly the opposite. Abaya is a student of Rabbi Yosef, and he challenges Rabbi Yosef on this. He says, Adarabba, on the contrary, it's exactly the opposite. If the husband would come in the land of Israel and say that I never sent that get, this whole thing is a forgery, we would say, maybe the husband's right. Why? Because the agent that came never said b'fanei nechtam. We never validated the document, and it could be the husband can come and protest to the divorce, and we're going to trust him. We could say that this whole thing was just to mess up the situation of this woman. So we shouldn't believe her because there is no statement of b'fanei nechtam. But outside the land of Israel, that if the husband is going to show up and try to make this into a whole scene, to mess up this whole divorce, we're not going to even listen to him. Why? Because the messenger that came, which happens to be one of these 5 women, had already made a statement of b'fanei nechtam. So we're going to ignore. So what's going to be a more clear-cut case is going to be when they came from Chutz La'aretz, outside the land of Israel. They made the statement, then we're going to trust them, and we'll never come to a problem of the husband saying, I never divorced her. Because we won't listen to the husband.
I don't see the point of saying that it was signed in my presence. I mean, anyone can say those things. Words are meaningless. Whoa.
Yes, the statement is made in front of a court.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's more of it's a real statement, right? Otherwise, you're going to start asking, whenever they interrogate someone in court, how do you know that it's true? Because in court, it's something that's more official. So the statement, b'fanei nechtam, have to be said in front of 3 people. So it has to be said in front of a court. He's going to make sure that this is a real statement.
And they had courts like this.
They had they
Just had
they had courts in Chutz La'aretz, but even when we were coming from Chutz La'aretz to Eretz Yisrael, you would have to make that statement.
Oh,
Okay. So
But the statement is verified by these people that are not acceptable.
you're right. You're right. The statement is being made by people that aren't acceptable.
So why would it be uncontested? The husband
Yeah.
could contest it.
Yeah. Nevertheless, Abai is saying that because the statement is said in court, we would accept it. And you see, it's sort of circular logic. Rabbi Yosef is saying that that it's a reason not to trust them because these people aren't reliable. And Abai is saying no. It's the reason why it's going to be good is since the husband will never interfere now because we're accepting it. So that's why it should be accepted only coming from outside of Israel. Yeah, your question is still there. That maybe if according to Rabbi Yosef's logic, we should just say that you don't accept it at all, and then when the husband comes, we won't believe it. Now, Tosfos doesn't learn like that. Tosfos says that even according to Rabbi Yosef, we're going to believe these people that aren't reliable. We're going to believe them when they say b'fanei nechtam, b'fanei nechtam. So what is Rabbi Yosef's concern? Says that even though if the husband shows up, we're not going to believe the husband against these people because they said that they were there at the signing, that we validated the document's notarized. Even if the husband shows up, we won't believe the husband, but the husband can still show up and bring witnesses that he never sent it. Together with witnesses, we will believe the husband. One against one, we won't believe the husband. But Rabbi Yosef was concerned that the husband's going to come and bring witnesses together with that. Okay, Tanya Kavasei Abai, we have a brisa that supports Abai. It goes like this: Reb Shimon ben Elazar Mishum Rabbi Akiva. Shimon ben Elazar says the name of Rabbi Akiva. Mishum is the Aramaic word for Mishem. In Aramaic, it's Mishum. Yeah, my students get confused. Mishum in Hebrew usually means because of. Mishum, because of. But in Aramaic, Mishum means Mishem, in the name of. So there's a vav over there. That's it. It's the vav throws people off. Anyway, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says in the name of Rabbi Akiva. Isha ne'menes lahavi gita mikal v'chaymer. A woman is believed to bring her own get from a kal v'chaymer. We're going to have this Gemara coming up. So how can a woman bring her own get? It goes like this: if people that aren't believed to say the husband passed away are yes believed to say to bring the document, a woman on her own returns from a trip and says that her husband passed away, and we believe her. For sure, we should believe her when she has the document together with her.
Whoa.
It's obvious. It's a good kal v'chaymer. Now the Gemara says we're not done with the kal v'chaymer. If that's how it works, that we believe the woman that's bringing her own get because of it's a kal v'chaymer from women that aren't believed to say that her husband died. Mimakam shabasa, and from the place that you're coming from, we have to go backwards now. Ma'ala halan in Aramaic, ma means just as. Ma'ala halan, just as there. In front of us, it was signed. In front of us, it was written. In front of us, it was signed. The woman herself that's bringing her own get has to say that it was written and signed in her presence. Now, if that's the case, it means she's coming from Chutz La'aretz. So, when do we trust these women? Obviously, coming from Chutz La'aretz, exactly as Abaya said, not like Rabbi Yosef. From the fact that the Brisa then goes and tells me that they have to say b'fanei nechtam means they're coming from Chutz La'aretz. Clear proof to Abaya. Amar Ravashi. Ravashi says Masnisin Nami Deyaka. The Mishnah is also exactly precise. Mishnah is precise exactly as Abaya said, Diktani, because it says the woman herself brings a get. But she has to say b'fanei nechtam. That means that our Mishnah is talking about coming from Chutz La'aretz. Okay. Rabbi Yosef, the Gemara has a question on Rabbi Yosef. Reisha v'seifa b'Chutz La'aretz mitziyasa ba'aretz. The Reisha over here is going back to the Mishnah that we had before, where we said everyone is allowed to bring a get except for a cheresh, shaita, v'katan, and a suma. Why is a suma, a blind person, not allowed to bring the get? There's nothing wrong with his intelligence. Said because he wasn't there at the writing of it. He was there, but he wasn't able to see. So b'fanenu, he's not able to say b'fanai nichtav b'fanai nechtam because he was blind. See, the whole reason for the blind person is because he's coming from Chutz La'aretz. So the Reisha is talking about coming from Chutz La'aretz. That's the first part. The Seifa is talking about when the woman herself brings the get, she has to say b'fanei nechtam b'fanei nechtam. In the Mitziyasa, the middle case, which is talking about the 5 women that you don't trust them to say the husband died, she's in Eretz Yisrael itself. So we have 3 cases. 2 of them, the first is coming out of Israel, from out of Israel. The last is coming from out of Israel. In the middle is a different scenario. Gemara says it's not a problem. Each one has its own scenario. Reisha v'seif v'chutzlaretz mitziyasa baretz. Gemara says mimai. How do you know this? Mi diktani ma ben get lemisa shaksav mechiach. It says the Mishnah asked, what's the difference between the get, bringing the get, which we trust these 5 women, and the death certificate, which we don't trust them, saying that the person died. It says because over here we have a document that comes along. Because over here we don't have a document. It doesn't say a document and her statement proves. Because she's not making a statement because she's in Israel.
5
That's Rabbi
different
Yosef's truth.
women that testified that someone's husband passed away. Do they have something to gain from that? I don't quite understand.
Yeah, those 5 women are not. They're the enemy of this wife. We don't trust them to say that her husband died.
Why is that?
Because they want her to just get ruined because she's going to get remarried. Her husband's still alive. And
So
she's going to get.
could be making it up.
They could be making it up, right? They don't have her best interest.
Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Regarding the blind person, understand, if a blind person, let's say, gone into 770 and heard the Rebbe speak, and he's in the crowd, he says, who's speaking? He said, that's the Rebbe. And he asks somebody else, and they say, that's the Rebbe. And he asks as many people, and they say, that's the Rebbe. He hears it. Couldn't he say, I was there and I heard it? Like the equivalent.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
why
the
is
only
it
thing
any
that he
different?
couldn't hear, was the writing of the get. Even though there is a concept of kan kulmasa, the sound of the quill, and it could be that he heard the sound of the quill, but he can't say that it was the writing of the get because he doesn't know what it
Everyone
was.
said, oh, Mazel Tov, it was just sealed, and he's in this room, and there's no reason not to trust those people. You can say, I was there, and I was there when it was sealed.
But because the statement is not that I heard that they were divorced, but it was divorced. The get was written and signed in front of me. That means that he has to be able to see it.
Okay, that's how we interpret it.
Okay, now that says Isha Atzma Mevia Chulu. The woman herself can bring her own get. The Gemara asks the question when we learned the Mishnah, we spoke out that there's a huge problem with this Mishnah. Isha, a woman, Mechimati Gita Liyadi Garshala, Mati means reach. A woman, when the get reaches her hand, she's divorced. How's she bringing a get? She's not an agent. But as soon as she received it, she's already divorced. Amar Ravuna says, Ba'imar, it's because the husband said, I'm giving you a get, but you shouldn't be divorced until you reach that. There's a stipulation here. So when she reaches that bezdin, she's going to have to say, because she wasn't divorced yet, because the husband made a stipulation. Why not? Today we don't do stipulation, but then they did stipulation. Where it says, Saif, Kimati Hasami Garshaba. No. A stipulation doesn't mean that she's getting divorced when she reaches the bezdin. Stipulation means she's divorced when the husband gave her the get. That's just like telling her stand on your head. She doesn't have to every time she stands on her head say b'fanei nechtam. That was just a stipulation. It has nothing to do with her get. It's a stipulation that goes back to when the divorce was given. You don't have to say b'fanei nechtam when the divorce took place a few months ago. You only have to say when at the actual divorce. When it's being handed over to her, the agent says, I was there at the writing of it. Elam Rav Huna bar Manayach Mishmei de Ravacha Brei de Ravika. Huna bar Manayach says the name of Ravacha, the son of Ravika. The Amarla, the husband said, Kimati hasam isnache aara b'shakli. When you reach the Bezdin, put it on the ground and take it back, and that will be your divorce, which means it's not a stipulation of the divorce that took place a few months ago. It's a divorce that's going to take place when you reach the Bezdin, and therefore when she gets divorced there, she has to say b'fanei nechta, b'fanei nechta. Gemara says, 1 second, you're messing things up here. If that's the case, that's exactly like the case where the husband throws the get on the floor and he tells his wife, pick it up. Rava says, that's not a good divorce. The husband needs to transfer the document to his wife, not have his wife pick it up from the floor. So here the husband's sending her on a mission. Go to a Bezdin, throw it on the floor and pick it up from the floor. That's not a good divorce. He has to transfer it to her directly. Rather, he says to her, you should be a messenger to bring the get until you reach there. When you get there, basically go like this. Go to the Bezdin in another city. Go to the Bezdin in another city. You're a messenger from me. When you get there, become a messenger from yourself and pass it over to your other hand or keep it in your hand. And now it's being a transfer from me to you only at that moment when you're in the Bezdin. So she's got, before the transfer, she has to say, b'fanei nechta, b'fanei nechta.
You can't do that.
The Gemara says, 1 second, you can't do that. It says, there's a problem over here because a messenger needs to be able to go back to the one that sent him or her and say that I fulfilled the mission. Because over here, the messenger is disappearing and she's becoming the owner of the whole event. She's not the messenger anymore. She's becoming the one that's being divorced. So the messenger part of her, it just disappeared into thin air. You need to have 2 separate people. One is a messenger that could go back and say, you should know I fulfilled my mission. And the woman that received the get that goes the other way. But over here, the woman that's the messenger is the one that's receiving it. That's not a good shliach. A shliach can't go back and say, I'm a shliach. You're not a shliach, you're the woman.
Back up. Since when can you juggle from one hand to the other? So that just was what happened.
Yeah, well, this is why. Because the logic of why not is because there's a rule about shlichus that shlichus eitzel abal. You have to be able to go
thought,
back.
like, for the same reason, like we were in time, an entity can't cover itself from itself, that there's no second entity.
Okay. Damala, we have a new teretz. He says to her, you're a shliach to bring the get until you reach the Bezdin. And when you do reach the Bezdin, make someone else a messenger to receive it on your behalf. So she remains a messenger to be able to go back. Gemara says, well, that's very interesting. We have 2 messengers here. You have a messenger from the husband, his wife. Ruvain sends his wife Ruvena to be a messenger to give the get to her shliach lekabala, which is Shimon. Shimon receives it on Ruvena's behalf. Now, can you have 2 messengers here? Is a question. One opinion says yes. There is another opinion. We have a concern that maybe the husband is going to be so insulted that you don't even want to receive the get from me. You have to send a messenger to receive the get from my shliach. If the husband gives the get to her shliach, then we say, okay, we know that he was willing to do that because he gave it. But if the husband sends a shliach to give the get to her, and instead of her receiving it, she sends another shliach to receive it. So it could be the husband's going to be so insulted. He says, I'm not divorcing this woman. I'm not letting her go free. She's insulting me. She doesn't even want to receive it. Maybe he's going to retract from the giving of the get. If that's the case, then over here.
Rabbi, that's very wild. How does a person's mind and thoughts take back actual actions? This is like, come on.
Yeah, but this is a machlokes if it works like that. So the Gemara says, Taimamai is always a rhetorical question. My taima is a real question. Taimamai is a rhetorical. Taimamai, what's the reason? Mishum dikabazayin the baal, because the husband would have got insulted. But over here, this was the exact instructions of the husband. So therefore, it's going to work. Gemara says, this is only a problem if the concern, this is only going to be an answer if our whole concern with two shluchim, shliach la'ilach and shliach la'kabbalah, is because we had a concern of the husband being insulted. But there is another concern. Other concern goes like this. You can't have the husband giving the get. You see, a husband can give the get to her and can also give it to her property. And her property can acquire it on her behalf and put it in her courtyard. The husband cannot put it into Shimon's courtyard. And then Ruvena goes to Shimon and buys the courtyard from Shimon. Because then it's not considered that the husband gave her the get. It's as if she's taking the get, and that doesn't work. So here what's happening is that if her messenger, it's very similar to her husband giving the get to, when you have two messengers, that the husband's giving the get to a third party, and then she's going and getting it from the third party. If that's the case, then I don't care if the husband gave the instructions for it. It looks too similar to a courtyard of someone else, which is a problematic a transfer of the get. But if according to the opinion that says you can't use two messengers because it's too similar to the courtyard that she acquires later on that had the get in it, what are you going to say now? So we have a new answer. The husband tells her, you're my messenger until you reach Israel. You can make a second shliach leilacha. This is called shliach oiseh shliach. She tells the first shliach that b'fanei nechtav b'fanei nechtam, and now you're a second shliach. The second shliach doesn't say that I'm b'fanei nechtav b'fanei nechtam. He can't. He's called a shliach sheni, but he's in front of a bezdin. So instead of saying b'fanei nechtav b'fanei nechtam, he says shliach bezdin ani. I'm a messenger from the bezdin. I'm a messenger from the first shliach, which that was done in front of a bezdin. And what's going to happen is she makes a second shliach to bring the get, and that second shliach gives the get to her. So it's not like she's not receiving it on her own. She is receiving it on her own. The whole problem before was when she makes a shliach lekabbalah, a shliach to an agent to receive it, from the agent to bring it, and these two shluchim meet in the middle. That was the problem. But over here, there's only two agents of bringing it. She was the first one. Someone else, Shimon, is the second one. And then there is no agent of receiving it. She receives it directly.
It's like a freight forwarding.
Right.
Right. Comes to one country, you give it to another guy, and he finds the guy in the country.
Yeah. Iba Yasema, the Gemara says another answer. You can either do it by giving it to the shliach, or you can do it in front of the bezdin. I was saying before that it's in front of the bezdin. Tosfos asks, why is this a Iba Yasema? Seems to be the same answer. Okay, let's leave it over here. Maybe have a good Shabbos, everyone.
Rabbi, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What about
Have a good Shabbos.
A good Shabbos.
the Uber Yerachimai?
Yeah.
So could you, according to